I've always considered myself a pretty easygoing guy. I'm not the type to hover or nitpick, and I definitely don't try to control how my wife, Lauren, chooses to spend her time. That said, every relationship has its limits, and last Friday, Lauren stepped way over one of ours. It all started earlier in the week. Lauren came home from work practically buzzing with excitement, going on about some party her friend Rachel was throwing. I'd met Rachel a handful of times before. She was one of those people who seemed to thrive on drama, and her parties had a reputation for getting a little out of hand. I wasn't thrilled at the idea of Lauren going, and I let her know. "Do you really think this is a good idea?" I asked her. "You know how Rachel's parties tend to go." Lauren just rolled her eyes at me. "It's just a party, Jake," she said, brushing me off. "I need a night out." I let out a sigh. "Fine," I said, though I didn't feel good about it. "But I'm just telling you now, those kinds of parties rarely end well." She dismissed me with a scoff, and that was the first red flag. By the time Friday afternoon rolled around, Lauren had gone into full prep mode. She spent hours perfecting her makeup, curling her hair, and trying on what seemed like every outfit she owned. When she finally came downstairs, I'd be lying if I said she didn't look incredible. She wore a tight black dress that hugged her figure and a pair of heels that made her legs look impossibly long. But as amazing as she looked, something about all that effort made my stomach twist. She wasn't dressing up for me, and I knew it. "You're sure it's just Rachel and the girls tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual even though my gut told me something was off. "Of course," she replied, avoiding my eyes. "Don't wait up." She kissed me on the cheek and walked out the door, leaving me with a sinking feeling I couldn't shake. I tried to distract myself with TV, but my mind kept wandering. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband, but Lauren had been acting differently lately. She'd been glued to her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't let me see. She'd also started working late more often than usual. Now, with her at Rachel's party, my thoughts spiraled. By 11 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I sent her a text, "How's the party?" No response. An hour later, I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. By 1 a.m., I wasn't just worried, I was angry. She knew exactly how I felt about this party, and now she couldn't even bother to respond. Fine, I thought. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd give her a taste of her own medicine. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to clear my head with a run. But when I checked her side of the bed, it was still empty. Lauren hadn't come home, and there were no messages or calls from her. I was furious, but I also knew I had to keep my cool. Confronting her without evidence would only give her room to spin a story. So, I started digging. I remembered we had a shared location tracking app on our phones, something she'd probably forgotten about. When I checked it, my heart sank. The app showed that she hadn't spent the night at Rachel's house. Around midnight, her phone had pinged at a hotel across town, and it stayed there until nearly 6 a.m. I stared at the screen, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But it wasn't. The proof was right there in front of me. At 9 a.m., Lauren finally walked through the door. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and she looked completely disheveled. She tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced. "Morning," she said, setting her purse down. "Sorry I didn't make it home. The party ran late, and I crashed on Rachel's couch." "Really?" I said, keeping my tone icy. "Because your phone says otherwise." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. I held up my phone and showed her the location data. She stammered, "Jake, I can explain." "Don't bother," I cut her off, walking past her. "You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." I packed a bag and left the house without looking back. I needed space, time to figure out my next move. All day, my phone buzzed with her calls and texts, but I ignored them. By the evening, I'd blocked her number altogether. If Lauren wanted to disrespect our marriage, she could deal with the fallout on her own. The following day, she showed up at the door of my hotel room. Her eyes were red and swollen, evidence of a sleepless night filled with tears. "Jake, please," she begged, her voice trembling. "Just let me explain." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, fixing her with a hard stare. "Explain what, Lauren?" I said, my tone sharp. "That you lied to me? That you spent the night at a hotel?" "By all means, I'm listening." Her lip trembled, but no words came out. That's when it hit me, whatever she'd done, she couldn't undo it, and I wasn't about to let her talk her way out of it either. Lauren stood there, her usual confidence shattered. She was trembling, unsure of herself, and it was a side of her I'd never seen before. The silence between us stretched on, heavy and suffocating. I wasn't going to make this any easier for her. If she wanted to explain, she'd have to do it on her own. "Jake," she finally said, her voice cracking like thin ice. "It's not what you think." I raised an eyebrow, my expression cold and unmoving. "Oh, really?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife lied to me, went to a party I asked her not to, and spent the night at a hotel. So, enlighten me, Lauren, what exactly am I misunderstanding?" Her lip quivered again as she struggled to find the right words. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't mean for it to happen? What, did you just accidentally trip and fall into someone's hotel room?" Her face turned crimson, and the guilt in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. I stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. "You've got 5 minutes. Start talking." She hesitated before stepping into the room, her movements slow and uncertain. She perched on the edge of the bed, wringing her hands like a kid caught sneaking cookies before dinner. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. "I just wanted to feel alive again." I stared at her, my patience wearing thin. "Feel alive again?" I said, my tone cutting. "What the hell does that even mean, Lauren? You've got a husband who loves you, a home, a life we built together, and that wasn't enough?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "Rachel introduced me to someone at the party," she admitted after a moment of hesitation. "A guy named Derek. We started talking, and one thing led to another." Hearing her say it out loud felt like someone had driven a knife into my chest and twisted it for good measure. My stomach churned, and I clenched my fists at my sides. "Spare me the details," I snapped, my voice like steel. "Just answer this, did you sleep with him?" Her silence said more than words ever could. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. That was all the confirmation I needed. I got up and started pacing the room, my anger bubbling to the surface. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I said, my voice rising with each word. "You didn't just betray me, Lauren, you destroyed the trust we spent 10 years building." "For what? A cheap thrill with some guy you just met?" "It wasn't like that," she shouted, her voice suddenly defensive. "I didn't plan for it to happen. I felt neglected, Jake. You're always so busy, so focused on work. I needed attention, and Derek gave me that." "Neglected," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "I work my ass off to give us a good life, to make sure we have everything we need. And your solution to feeling lonely is to run off with some random guy? That's your answer? Unbelievable." Her composure crumbled, and she broke down completely, burying her face in her hands as sobs racked her body. "I'm sorry," she choked out between sobs. "I know I messed up, but I love you, Jake. Please, give me another chance." I stared at her, my heart a tangled mess of anger, pain, and sadness. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive her and try to move past this. But another part of me, the louder, more rational part, knew I couldn't. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, and choices come with consequences. I can't do this right now, I said finally, my voice cold and steady. I need time to think, I said, my voice colder than I intended. Go home, Lauren. Jake, please. Go home, I repeated firmly. Reluctantly, she turned to leave, glancing back at me one last time before the door clicked shut behind her. As soon as she was gone, I collapsed onto the bed, my mind racing in 1,000 different directions. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to throw something, to find a way to erase her confession from my memory. But no matter what I did, her words replayed over and over in my head. I felt neglected. I needed attention. Over the next few days, I barely functioned. I called in to take a leave of absence from work, deleted every one of Lauren's messages without reading them, and spent hours trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Could I forgive her? Should I even try? Or was this the end of our marriage? Then, out of nowhere, I got a call that changed everything. It was Rachel. Her voice, usually upbeat and bubbly, was subdued, almost hesitant. "Hey, Jake," she said softly. "I heard about what happened, and I think you need to know something." I gritted my teeth. "What could you possibly have to tell me, Rachel?" I snapped. "You're the one who pushed her to go to that damn party in the first place." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she finally spoke. "Jake. Derek's married." My stomach dropped like a stone. "What?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Derek's married," she repeated. "His wife doesn't know anything about this." I thought Lauren should know before she does something stupid, like trying to contact him. I clenched the phone tightly, my blood boiling. "Unbelievable," I muttered. "You're all a bunch of liars." "I didn't know it would go this far," Rachel said defensively. "I thought it was just harmless fun." "Harmless fun?" I spat. "You've destroyed a marriage, Rachel. You and your idea of fun are why my life is falling apart." I hung up before she could say another word. This wasn't just Lauren's betrayal anymore. It was a tangled web of deceit that was bigger than I'd imagined. And I wasn't about to let it go unanswered. Sitting there in stunned silence, Rachel's words echoed in my mind, "Derek's married." The betrayal had already been devastating, but the thought that Lauren's actions might have ruined another family sent my anger to a whole new level. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was bigger, messier, and far more complicated than I could have imagined. I needed answers, and I needed them now. The first thing I did was search for Derek. Rachel hadn't given me much to go on, but I remembered Lauren mentioning his last name once during one of her giddy retellings of the party. It didn't take long to track him down on social media. His profile was public, and there he was, grinning in a family photo with a stunning brunette and 2 kids. His wife. I scrolled through his posts, looking for anything that hinted at his double life. From the outside, he seemed like the perfect family man: vacation photos, anniversary tributes, snapshots from his kids' soccer games. But I knew better. Behind all those curated smiles was a man who had wrecked my marriage and was living a lie. It was time to turn the tables. I sat down and carefully composed a message to his wife, whose name I discovered was Brooke. "Hi Brooke. My name is Jake, and I believe we need to talk about something involving your husband. I know this will come as a shock, but I have evidence of Derek's relationship with my wife. Please reach out if you'd like to discuss this further." I attached the location data I'd saved and a group selfie from the party that I'd found on Rachel's page, showing Derek and Lauren laughing together. It wasn't irrefutable proof, but it was enough to raise questions. Then I waited. The next day, my phone buzzed with a reply. It was from Brooke. "Hi Jake. I don't even know how to respond to this. Can we meet in person? I need to understand what's happening. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near her house. When I arrived, Brooke was already there, sitting at a corner table. Her hands clutched a steaming mug of coffee, and the dark circles under her eyes made it clear she hadn't slept. She looked up as I approached. "Jake?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Brooke." I sat across from Brooke, unsure of how to begin. She broke the silence first. "I need to know everything," she said, her voice steady but strained. "Don't hold anything back." So, I told her everything I knew. I walked her through the party, the hotel, and the confession Lauren had made. Brooke listened closely, her expression a mix of disbelief and pain, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her face a mask of anger and shock. "He told me he was working late that night," she said bitterly. "I should have known. He's been so distant for months." I pulled out my phone and showed her the evidence I'd gathered. Her hand trembled as she scrolled through the screenshots, her eyes scanning each one with a heavy sadness. Finally, she set the phone down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for telling me. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but at least now I know the truth." As I left the coffee shop, I was hit with a strange wave of emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of relief knowing Derek's lies had been exposed. But on the other hand, there was a hollow feeling in my chest. Nothing about this would undo what Lauren had done to us. If anything, it had only pulled more people into the chaos. That night, Lauren showed up at the house again. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and swollen like she'd been crying for hours. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse. I let her in, though mostly out of curiosity. I wanted to see how much she knew. "Make it quick," I said, crossing my arms. She took a deep breath, her gaze darting nervously around the room. "I know you talked to Brooke." "Good," I said flatly. "Maybe now you'll finally see the mess you've created." Her face crumpled, and she shook her head. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Derek and it was stupid. A mistake." I scoffed, my frustration boiling over. "You keep calling it a mistake, Lauren," I snapped. "But mistakes don't happen over and over again. This wasn't some accident. It was a choice, and now you get to live with the consequences." She sat down on the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I want to fix this, Jake," she said, her voice cracking. "I'll do whatever it takes." I let out a bitter laugh. "Fix this?" I said, shaking my head. "You think there's a way to fix this? You cheated on me. You lied to me. You dragged our life through the dirt, Lauren. There's no fixing that." For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "Are you saying it's over?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated, but only for a moment. "Yes, Lauren. It's over. I deserve better than this." She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands, but I felt no pity for her. Instead, for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The next morning, I got another message from Brooke. "Hi Jake. I confronted Derek. He admitted everything. I'm filing for divorce. I just wanted to thank you for being honest with me. I hope you find some peace in all of this." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling an odd sense of closure. Derek and Lauren had managed to destroy 2 marriages, but somehow, Brooke and I had come out of it stronger. Wiser. It wasn't the ending I had envisioned, but maybe it was the one I needed. The days following my conversation with Brooke felt surreal. I went through the motions, numb but hyper-aware of every decision I made. Lauren kept blowing up my phone with messages that swung wildly between desperate apologies and angry accusations about how I'd ruined her life by exposing her affair. I blocked her number, but she started using new ones to reach me. Still, I ignored every attempt. It wasn't just to punish her, it was for my own sanity. I needed the space to think clearly, to process everything, and to figure out what my next steps would be. On the third day of silence, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Assuming it might be Brooke or my lawyer, I reluctantly answered. "Hello. Jake, it's me," Lauren said, her voice trembling but laced with an odd determination. I sighed, already regretting picking up. "What do you want, Lauren?" I need to see you," she said, her voice cracking. "Not to beg or plead. I just need to talk." "Please, Jake." Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, but curiosity got the better of me. "Fine," I said after a pause. "But let me be clear, this isn't a reconciliation. You say what you need to say, and then we're done." "Thank you," she said, sounding almost relieved. "Can I come over tonight?" "No," I replied sharply. "We'll meet in public. Neutral ground. There's a coffee shop on 5th. Be there at 7. She agreed, and I hung up without another word. That evening, I arrived at the coffee shop earlier than planned, choosing a table by the window so I could see her coming. I wanted to get a sense of her mood, whether this was genuine remorse or just another attempt to manipulate the situation. When Lauren finally walked in, I was taken aback by her appearance. She'd always been the type to look polished and composed, but tonight she looked raw. Her hair was unkempt, and the streaks in her makeup told the story of countless tears. She clutched her purse tightly, as if it were the only thing holding her together, and made her way over to me. "Thanks for meeting me," she said quietly, sitting down across from me. "Say what you need to say," I replied, keeping my tone even and detached. Lauren took a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I know I've lost you," she began. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to understand, I didn't cheat because I stopped loving you." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. "Really? Because when you were sneaking off to a hotel with Derek, it didn't exactly feel like love was part of the equation." Her face crumpled, but I didn't let up. "You need to own this, Lauren. Stop trying to shift the blame." "I'm not making excuses," she said, her voice rising slightly before she composed herself again. "I was lonely, Jake. You were always working, always distracted. I felt invisible." I shook my head in disbelief. "Do you even hear yourself right now?" I snapped. "You're blaming me for your choices. I worked hard to provide for us, for the life we built together. And your response was to throw it all away." She looked down, her eyes brimming with tears. After a long pause, she whispered, "You're right. It wasn't your fault. It was mine, all of it. And now I'm paying the price." For a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered everything, the lies, the betrayal, the sleepless nights wondering where she was and who she was with. Whatever guilt she was feeling now wasn't my burden to carry. "What do you want from me, Lauren?" I asked finally. "If you're here to ask for a second chance, let me save you the trouble." "The answer is no." She shook her head quickly. "I know it's over," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I needed to say I'm sorry. Not for me, for you. You didn't deserve this." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't hit me the way I thought they might. They felt hollow, like her apology was more about easing her conscience than making amends. "I appreciate the apology," I said flatly, "but it doesn't change anything." An awkward silence settled between us before Lauren stood up. "I'll leave you alone now," she said softly, her shoulders slumping. I hope you find someone who gives you what I couldn't." I didn't respond, watching as she walked out of the coffee shop. I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness. Just a quiet, definitive sense that it was over. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Olivia, to finalize the divorce papers. As always, she was direct and efficient. "She's going to fight you on the house," Olivia warned, her tone calm but firm. "But with the evidence we have, she doesn't stand a chance." "Let her try," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm not budging." We spent hours going over every detail, making sure there were no loose ends. By the time I left her office, I felt lighter, like a massive weight had finally been lifted off my shoulders. The legal battle ahead didn't scare me, I was already free where it mattered most. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Brooke. "Hey Jake. I just wanted to thank you again for being honest with me. It wasn't easy, but it gave me the clarity I needed to take control of my life. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." I stared at the screen, a small smile tugging at my lips. Brooke had gone through her own hell, just like I had, but it was clear she was finding her way out. Maybe we both were. I typed out a reply. "Thanks, Brooke. Same goes for you. Here's to new beginnings." The divorce process dragged on for weeks, but I refused to let it consume me. I stayed focused on rebuilding my life, regaining the stability and self-worth that Lauren's betrayal had shaken. Each day, I felt a little stronger, a little clearer. I was finally moving forward, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was back in control of my life. Olivia, my lawyer, was relentless. By the time the court issued its final rulings, I had come out on top. I kept the house, retained the majority of our savings, and, most importantly, secured the clean slate I so desperately needed. As for Lauren, she moved into a cramped apartment across town. Through mutual friends, I heard her fling with Derek had fizzled out. Turns out, Brooke wasn't the only skeleton in his closet. I didn't care. Whatever was happening in Lauren's life was no longer my concern. One quiet evening, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There she was, Lauren, smiling brightly on our honeymoon. There we were, laughing at a family barbecue, caught in a moment that felt untouchable. For a moment, I let myself wonder where it had all gone wrong. But then, I stopped. That chapter of my life was over. It was time to stop dwelling on the past and focus on the future. Brooke and I had stayed in touch, though sporadically. Our conversations were mostly supportive, like two survivors who had braved the same storm. Then, one day, she sent me a message that caught me off guard. "Hey Jake. There's a new art exhibit opening downtown this Friday. Would you like to go?" I stared at the text, unsure how to respond. Was this just a friendly gesture? Or was there something more to it? After a few minutes of overthinking, I decided to stop second-guessing myself. "I'd love to." "What time?" That Friday, I met Brooke outside the gallery. She looked stunning in her simplicity, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in loose waves. Seeing her again felt different. There was no awkwardness, no lingering baggage, just an ease I hadn't experienced in years. As we wandered through the exhibit, our conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about art, life, and the chaos we'd both endured. Somewhere along the way, I realized something that caught me off guard: I liked her. Not just as someone who shared my pain but as someone who made me feel alive again. In the weeks that followed, our outings became more frequent. Coffee dates turned into dinners, and dinners turned into long walks by the river. We took things slow, neither of us in a rush to dive into something new. But the connection between us was undeniable. Brooke was thoughtful, kind, and fiercely independent, the kind of person who made me believe in love again. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if none of this had happened?" she asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But honestly, I think it was all necessary. If it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. She smiled, her eyes glistening in the fading light. I feel the same way. As time went on, Brooke and I grew closer. She wasn't just someone who understood my past, she was someone who gave me hope for the future. We didn't rush into labels or grand declarations, but every moment we spent together felt like another step towards something real. Meanwhile, Lauren faded further into the background. The rare occasions we interacted for legal or logistical reasons were cold and transactional. She reached out once, leaving a voicemail saying she missed me, that she'd made a terrible mistake. I deleted it without listening to the rest. I had moved on, and there was no going back. Exactly 1 year after that fateful night Lauren went to the party, I found myself back at the coffee shop where she had confessed. But this time, it was different. I wasn't there to revisit old wounds. I was there with Brooke, laughing over pastries and planning our next adventure. As she reached across the table and took my hand, a wave of clarity washed over me. The pain, the betrayal, the heartache, it had all been worth it because it had led me here. For the first time in years, I felt truly free.